Welcome back, folks, to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. Now, this is a special edition of Jack's Corner, as I need to get this particular topic out to everyone more expeditiously to report on an event that happened Monday night in Louisville, Kentucky, that everyone, particularly in Kentucky, will want to know about quickly. It is and should also be of grave concern and importance to everyone around the country, and I will tell you why. There was a big debate in Louisville, Kentucky Monday night of national consequence. Currently in Kentucky, there is a three-way race for a U.S. Senator between Representative Barr, Andy Barr, former Attorney General Daniel Cameron, and businessman Nate Morris. Technically, there are about a dozen listed as running for the office, but the only ones with the name recognition and poll standing to qualify for the debate are the three that I just listed. Last night, I attended the debate sitting at a front table with the president of the TV station that was covering the debate and broadcasting it throughout the state and beyond. I personally know all of the men on the stage last night, and it is from that knowledge that I can tell you that all of them are known to me to be men of integrity, of good moral standing, and American-loving patriots. They would all do well in the position as a U.S. Senator. The big question Kentucky voters have, however, and a concern to the rest of America, is the necessity of picking the one of the three that can assuredly win. This is a must-win election, folks. So that was the big question last night as people witnessed the debate as to which candidate was most likely to aggressively fight for that seat that's being left open by Mitch McConnell. Standing on the stage from left to right was Representative Barr, then former Attorney General Cameron, and then businessman Nate Morris, who, for those outside of Kentucky who are unfamiliar with him, he had the endorsement of Charlie Kirk before he died, and then Elon Musk, just to give you some better idea as to who Mr. Morris is. All three men are very much liked by President Trump. But the big question again is who can win in November? A Senate seat in the United States government is one that you have to fight for. You just can't ask politely and expect to prevail. And that is exactly what Nate Morris did on Monday night. Now, I know that such aggressiveness is sometimes a turnoff to some people, but as my father used to say, faint heart never won fair lady. Think back on Trump's campaigns. He was bombastic, but it worked because the people saw he was authentic. It is the way of doing things in the rough and tumble of the political world that brings you either victory or defeat. Now, in full disclosure, Representative Barr is a friend and, in fact, the only one who has gotten a four-figure donation from me. But as you should know me by now, and particularly from all of my writings and podcasts and my challenge of many weak Republicans, when it comes to doing what's right for the state and the country, friendship plays no role, particularly when it comes to telling the truth and making the right decisions. Many know this from my remarks about Senator Rand Paul and Senator McConnell and Representative Massey and other Republicans around the country. They get caught up in a philosophy rather doing what is right for the country in real time, given the current circumstances. So in the debate, Representative Barr was aggressive and formidable in answering some of the attacks from Morris. And yes, Barr did in the past impale himself on his own petard with regards to some of his comments and stances on immigration and President Trump and the impeachment that the Democrats tried and attempted twice, which has come back to bite him. But then he comes from a more purple area of Kentucky, that being around Lexington, Kentucky, and the University of Kentucky, that fake bubble of intellectualism wherein he has to navigate that type of constituency. In fact, just about an hour before the debate, I talked to Andy about that and advised him that that's the type of thing that he needs to address and tackle head on. You don't dance around something like that. In fact, I did the same for Nate Morris about some of the withering attacks that he has received from Mr. Barr, painting him as a liberal for some of the stances that he had to take as a businessman. You see, folks, when the Democrats are in power, they enact legislation and exercise their power in such a way that if you want to survive either politically or as a conservative or even as a businessman, you've got to play their game, just like the corruption we have seen in Minnesota, with nearly $19 billion of fraud having been committed under the noses and with the blessings of Democrat Governor Walz and the Socialist Attorney General Ellison. And the same here in Kentucky with our leftist Democrat Governor Beshear, who wants you to think that he's a little choir boy, but he is anything but. And he has shaken down many people. He's a shakedown artist and genetically incapable of telling the truth. Now he wants to be your president. I have clients and friends who have had to bend the knee to him to get things done. That is not the way things should be, but it is, sadly, the reality. Nevertheless, back to the point, Andy Barr did a good job, but at times was too brief in his explanations and occasionally looked a little bit like the deer in the headlights. But those are tough situations and under time constraints. Morris missed a few opportunities as well, but there were strict time limits being enforced on everyone. So you might be asking at this point, but what about Daniel Cameron? Well, there lies the point. He stood between Morris and Barr as they battled it out between each other, with Cameron in the middle, being talked over and around. It was as if he was just an observer. The back and forth between Barr and Morris gave some spice to the debate, but poor Cameron, for all intents and purposes, wasn't there. He was the polite gentleman on the stage, which afterwards everybody acknowledged. No one could remember a thing that Cameron said that was memorable. Cameron could have had a future in Kentucky politically. However, McConnell forced him to run for governor too soon. Cameron should have stayed in the position as Attorney General and run for re-election in that position that he would have easily won to gain more popularity and name recognition as well as gravitas. He didn't. And he was forced too soon and lost his bid for the governor's race. No one wants to put money on that horse again, and last night in the debates pretty much proved to the listeners that Daniel doesn't have enough fire in the belly to take on what is one of the most important senatorial races in the country. This seat should be abundantly safe coming from a red state like Kentucky, but then you must remember that Kentucky is very fickle, as established by Governor Andy Beshear, a radical left Democrat who won the governorship by a squeaker of 5,500 votes, all because of the influence of the teachers' unions. When you have 120 counties in the state where for most of them the largest employer in those counties is the school board with tons of money, you can't take anything for granted. And until we rid ourselves of the radicals in our school systems and their unions, we will have to contend with this, and that takes someone who is willingly and aggressively wanting to fight for the job, and Cameron just didn't show that last night. And I've been around him enough previous to the debate to know he's a great guy, a great Christian guy, a great husband and a father, but he does not have that fire in the belly. But back to the debate. It was clear to everyone that Cameron was not even in the running insofar as who won, because he was lost in all the repartee between Morris and Barr. So in my sampling of the opinions post-debate, most people in that instance gave the edge. I wouldn't say just said Morris won it outright. They gave the edge to Morris, but they found Barr credible and having done a good job. Both men have different strengths. Barr comes from, as I said previously, a more purple area which he has carried for a long time, which does give him an advantage. Then you have Morris being the successful businessman carrying a very conservative message with impressive endorsements and displaying himself as more in the Trumpian style. He seems to have the intestinal fortitude to aggressively attack the Democrat challenger. The problem with incumbency, as with Barr, is that it gives you a record. And when you are in an elected office, with every decision that you make, you bleed a little bit of political capital each time. So that is to Barr's disadvantage, and in some respects to Morris's advantage. Of course, Morris does not have the same name recognition and will have to spend a lot of money and time getting that name recognition and establishing himself. Moreover, he is an unknown politically, which has both its positives and negatives. Everyone tries to model themselves after Trump, but what most people fail to recognize is that Trump was a celebrity far before he ran for office and had one of the highest name recognitions and identities in the country, if not around the world. That was the problem that former Governor Bevin here in Kentucky had, and I believe was part of his defeat, is that he was counting on being able to do some of the things that Trump was doing that only Trump could do or get by with, but Bevin couldn't. So to wrap up this on the debate, some people were swayed in Morris's direction, but in the same breath, and to the credit of Barr, he gave a good performance as well. I don't know that there was particularly any loser because there were great comments all around, evenly spread out, it seemed like, which is a strange thing to say in a debate. Now, in Barr's situation, he has experience in lengthy incumbency. Cameron, being a fine, moral, and decent man and gentleman, as most of those interviewed stated. And then there was Morris, being a successful outsider with very credible endorsements and an aggressive Trumpian style showing the fire in the belly that is essential in this kind of race. One often repeated refrain from most of the people with whom I talked was more concerned about not the conservative bona fides of any of the men on the stage, but rather which one could deliver victory. So that's going to be the deciding choice in the primary election in May. So for all of you outside of Kentucky, and as I have said repeatedly, all elections have become national now because of the closeness and tightness in our Congress, and of the national importance because it will ultimately affect you as to who takes McConnell's seat in the Senate and who controls the Senate. It's important for everybody to be concerned and interested, whether you live in Kentucky or outside. Well, folks, that will do for this special edition, but stay tuned for more news to come this week. Until then, I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.